It's beer o'clock on Real Ale Craft Beer. I'm pretty excited for this beer, and I'm sure the people at Greene King are pretty excited about what they produced here too. Stout has made a bit of a dent, I think, in the beer market, and that's down to probably the big G in Ireland, in Dublin, as I call them. I'm not going to give them any more promotion because they promote themselves enough, and essentially they're one big marketing machine. When people think of Stout, they only think of one company. But there are people in the market that are trying to change that. They're trying to change mindsets. They're trying to change, and they're trying to make a dent into big G. Camden Town AB InBev they had a bit of a go with their Camden Stout. Don't really see it as much as I probably like. And then thinking about it, that beer did end up in Home Bargains, which is a little bit of a shame. Others have come along. Anspach and Hobday with their London Black. I think personally that's a fantastic example of a stout. But then you have your regional brewers. I've been doing this for 14 years, and I've seen many regional brewers go for the big G and try and make a dent in their market. I even went to a big event with Brains Brewery in Cardiff in Wales, just down the road from me. They invited a load of beer bloggers in. It was there, Adrian Turney-Jones, Tim Hampson, myself, I was there, Arthur Daly from Brew Wales was there. Bloggers who had quite a big following, and Brains knew what they were doing. They were trying to kind of promote this Brains Black Stout, the release of Brains Black, the best they possibly could with the budget they had, and that was perfectly acceptable. But what happened to Brains Black? It kind of, like many of the regional breweries and like many of the stouts that have come and gone, have gone the way of the dodo, unfortunately. Yet, there's another brewer who are having a go. Now this brewer, this is an interesting one, because Greene King, they're quite a powerful company in that they have a lot of pubs in the UK. If this made any kind of small dent, or if there was one company that could make that small dent, I think it could be Greene King. But the liquid has to be good. Old Midnight Hen, 4.2% ABV, 500 milliliter clear glass bottle with the Morland bottle cap. Old Speckled Hen is one of Britain's, certainly if you're an ale drinker, I would say kind of like heritage beers. They're a beer that you go into a nice thatched cottage pub, you see the Old Speckled Hen, you go, that's going to be fairly solid. The beer travels to America. I've reviewed the beer with an American in Florida over the airwaves before now, and you know, it's a beer that's made a dent. So what they're trying to do here with this delicious English stout at 4.2% ABV is not only try and pull on the pubs that they have and get it into there, but they're also looking to branch out from, or use the Old Speckled Hen name to try and make a dent in the market. I would love nothing more. I would love nothing more for one of these companies to succeed in what they're trying to do. Because I don't drink the big G, because I think it's a terrible beer. It's a terrible example of a stout. Awful example of a stout is the big G from Dublin. Awful, awful, awful stuff. Syrupy, awful, sweet liquid with no real taste of roasted malt whatsoever. Let's see how this is. It had a one finger white head. It's a kind of a jet black beer in the glass. A little bit of carbonation as you rock the beer back and forth. Let's get the aroma on the beer. It does look a little thin. If I'm to be critical at all about the beer to begin with, it looks a little bit thin. But there's some roasted malt here. There's a bit of roasty toastiness going on here. It smells pretty good. Let's dive in. Cheers, everybody. Now, I picked this beer up in Sainsbury's. It was £2 a bottle. It is a bit thin. It is a bit watery. It definitely is. I think they had to hit a price point. I think the Camden Stout, that actually launched into Sainsbury's. I think the Camden Stout was about £3 or £4 a can for a 440 milliliter. It was okay. It was one of those nitro stouts. There's a balance. There's a balance because the Big G are able to produce so much of the damn stuff. They can produce it cheaply, and they can stick it out there for £2 a can. And this is what companies like Greene King are having to compete with. They're having to create a liquid that is, it has to be better than Guinness. I've said it now, not the Big G. It has to be better than the Big G, but at the same time it needs to compete on price. This tastes like a mild. It tastes like a roasty, toasty, dark mild of a beer. And that's what I'm going with here. It really is too thin for a stout. I never ever wanted to kind of come in knocking this beer. I really wanted this beer to work because I really want someone to come along and knock the Big G off their perch, only because there's two reasons. I always love an underdog, and I think if a company was to come along and challenge the Big G and take away some of their market share, then they would have to change their beer. They would have to revert to more of an original recipe for the Big G, and they would have to make it better. I'm going to stand here and maintain that I still think if I drink 3 cans of the Big G, I will wake up in the morning with the most horrendous hangover. And that's because I think there's a lot of witchcraft going on. There's a lot of syrups, there's a lot of dye, there's a lot of it's not really a stout in my eyes. And if somebody was to come along and challenge it, they would then have to look to produce and go back to producing a better standard of stout, a better quality of stout. It's a bit like if Android wasn't around and Apple had their own way with the iPhone. If everybody had an iPhone, the iPhone would become bang average, and Apple would become very lazy. But Apple can't become lazy, and Apple can't rest on their laurels because of Android. But in the stout market, there's only one competitor, and they're allowed to be lazy, and they're allowed to produce something black in a glass that they call a stout. Until we have a real competitor that brews a competitive stout that can sell and to take market share away from the Big G, then the Big G will always be allowed to produce bang average stout, bang average black liquid, the sweet. This unfortunately isn't it. I don't think this is enough for people to go, hey, I'm going to drink this over the Big G. And that's what, unfortunately, that's what people are fighting against constantly. I've seen so many companies come and go trying to produce a decent stout for a very average price. This is decent enough. I will finish the glass. It's a bit roasty toasty. It's drinking more like a traditional dark mild. It's a 7 out of 10. 7 out of 10 from Real Ale Craft Beer. Please put your comments in the comments box. Subscribe to our daily beer and food reviews. Give us a big fat thumbs up. Boom. Cheers.